Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday night, and that means it is time for Friends and Fiction. Let's get rolling because we have 4 amazing guests tonight and a lot to celebrate. I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristin Harmel.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
Sorry, I'm just so excited to say, and this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors. Endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians.
I feel like we should look into like how many times we actually screw up our saying our own names at the beginning of the show. Like it's like 50% of the time. Like we mess up the easiest part.
Like it really is, and like we mess up our names, I think, more than anything else. Like for sure, we need to have like a blooper reel of us saying our names wrong or out of order, or it's like it's really not that hard. But anyway, fortunately, we say other people's names okay. So tonight we have Megan Miranda and Mary Huddleston and Asher Paul will be joining us for the after show.
And you know, since the beginning, over 3 years ago, in that strange time in 2020, we have been here for you since then to bring you incredible authors, hot reads, and fascinating interviews, all while supporting independent booksellers. And one way that you can help us support indies is to buy from them when and where you can, or to visit our own Friends and Fiction bookshop.org page, where you can find books by the 4 of us and all of our guests at a discount. And speaking of simply amazing books, don't forget that we have the Friends and Fiction official book club page. It is with Brenda and Lisa on their own Facebook page. On July 17th, Kristin Harmel, our Kristin Harmel, that Kristin Harmel, the one whose book, The Paris Daughter, just hit number 9 on the New York Times list, will be with them to discuss, guess what? The Paris Daughter.
Lucky y'all. I can't wait. That's going to be great. Okay, so now without further ado, let's welcome Annabelle Monaghan.
Annabelle's debut adult novel, Nora Goes Off Script, was released last summer. Before that, Annabelle wrote fiction for young adults and a column for not-so-young adults.
Annabelle grew up in Los Angeles, and she attended Duke University, where she studied English. She has an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, which is a super slacker business school, and previously worked as an investment banker.
She also, in her spare time, I guess, used to teach novel writing at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. Annabelle now lives in the suburbs of New York City with her family. Her new novel, which I just adored, same time next summer, was just released earlier this month on June 6th. Alan, can you...
I was going to say, Annabelle, can you bring Alan on? I'm really hitting on a lot tonight.
So happy to be here.
We're so glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Annabelle, we love to do a quick warm-up chat with our guests before we dive into our real questions. And I love how the back of this book has beach rules, including do take long walks on the sand, do put an umbrella in every cocktail, and do not run into your first love. Yes. So, ladies, since this is my favorite season, have I mentioned that I love summer on here? But I'm not sure if I talk
once
about
or
that
twice.
much,
Do you?
but-
We didn't know. Yeah.
Okay. But I want to know what your rules for summer are. So, Patti.
I would say, I was thinking back when I knew this was going to be the question, I was thinking back to childhood summers. And even then this was true. My rule is always, always make sure you have a book in your beach bag. How about you, MKA?
My rule is to follow the sun, but now, if you can see, I have very fair skin, and I grew up in Florida, and there's a lot of sun damage. So now my rule for summer is follow the sun, but in a hat and sunscreen, and a lot of extra things.
Umbrellas.
Good plan. Good plan. Mine is to just bring plenty of water, right? But also plenty of wine, because why not? And snacks for your kid, because there is nothing worse than being on the beach with a hungry 7-year-old.
True.
It's true. Annabelle, what about you? Do you have any personal, beyond what is stated in your book, any other personal beach rules?
My new rule is to release a book every summer. I'm trying to. That's something I'm working on. But my personal rule is I try. My children are a little bit older now, so it's easier. But I spend most of the winter trying to figure out where my kids are going to be so that I can have a summer. I'm not driving them around all summer. So does everyone have a job? Does everyone have someplace to go during the day so that I don't miss the summer? Because I sometimes feel like as a mom, it's just like more work during the summer.
100%.
Yes, I totally get that. There's like a lot of carpooling around. I feel like I just have so many fewer rules during the summer. I don't know what it is. It's like my brain switches into like kid mode, and I'm like, oh, we had cheeseburgers for lunch and dinner. That's fine. It's fine. Now, if that was February, I would be like, no, put that back. Or like everyone's ordering ice cream every day. That's great. Yes. Why not? I don't know what it is. It's
S'mores for lunch. Why not?
It's not a problem. Well, Annabelle, we want to dive into talking about this great book.
And I am going to start. Now, people always assume that beach books, like the ones some of us write, are all fizz and no depth. But Same Time Next Summer has such emotional depth. I mean, Sam and Wyatt have both survived a shared family trauma, and they have the scars to prove it. Could you talk about their journey, physical and emotional? And I really loved the way you framed that right from the beginning, where Sam is telling us about what the Long Island Expressway does to her adult psyche.
Yeah. So I love the summer. I love writing a summer book for the reason that it's also sensory. It's all, you have all those memories associated with summer. And the first scene in this book is Sam leaving the city, going to Long Island, and remembering how when she was a child, that was, you kick off your hard shoes and you put on your flip-flops and, all the rules go out the window. And since she's had her heart broken and since she's had this trauma, her identity has actually changed from it. She becomes a person who is very hard, very armored, a little bit icy. She has done everything to make sure that she's not going to have her heart broken again. And one of the ways she protects herself is by just not going back to the beach, not going back to the place where she used to be that other person and she used to be free. So she stays in the city. In this book, her mother guilts her into going back to the beach. And it's sort of the beginning of her transformation back into herself.
Love that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Was that too many words? What do you guys think?
No, that was perfect.
In fact, you could tell by the silence, we wanted more words. We were like,
Sorry,
Annabelle, we're going to have to cut your time short.
That's all the time we have for Annabelle today.
Is it?
Did you hear that tick tock, tick tock? No, I was leaning forward, really listening and remembering what it was like in the back of the station wagon on the long drive to Cape Cod, where every passing mile meant one less rule, one less, thing to do, more freedom. And I was right along for it. So, which brings me to the setting for the novel. It's set on the North Fork of Long Island. Am I right? That's right. The North Fork.
It's made up Long Island.
Okay.
So I don't really know where it is. It is a fake. I don't want anybody to call me out on the geography. So
we know. We get it. Same thing. But it's rendered with such tenderness and specificity specificity, like the cove and the trees and the village itself, that you would think it was very real. Is there a real life inspiration? And if there is, like, how do we get there?
It's almost like it's back in your mind. I
Yeah.
grew up in Los Angeles, like you said, and I really spent a lot of time as a child at the beach. We would go Christmas Day to the beach, and I, like all of my childhood memories, I have my feet in the sand, and I think, like, my sister has a place in Long Island, and the beach there is different. There's those dunes that you go through to get to the ocean. And there's something about those dunes that are even more, you're not just leaving a parking lot to get to the beach. You're walking through something magical to get there. And I really wanted to write about that.
Beautiful. Well, you
That's
did,
so
and you made us feel like we were there. So,
there are dunes here, and I think I just take that for granted, that you walk through the dunes to get to the beach. I don't know.
No, I would drive. First of all, we had to drive to the beach in Los Angeles, and you would drive down the California incline onto the Pacific Coast Highway, and you would get to a parking lot, and then the sand would start. And when I tell you that's about as exciting as anything I can think of, that was a thrill to do that. But there's something about the way the beaches are on the East Coast where they're so accessible. I just love it.
It's true. That's very, very true. Well, there is a through line in this plot that has to do with the creative process, something that I think we all probably know a little bit about, and how it affects the characters when their creativity is stunted or suppressed. We can't help but notice that you have an MBA from Wharton and that your first career was in investment banking. So is there something of you in the character of Sam, maybe? And also, what's the takeaway from investment banking?
Yeah, could you give us some investment banking advice?
Yeah. Some land you should buy. I got a hot stock tip. No, the takeaway from investment banking is I paid off my student loans and got out pretty much the same day. I was like, wow, that was a terrible idea. And I got out of there after a couple of years. I always wanted to write. And so it took me, I didn't publish my first book until I was 37 years old. So it took me a really long time to get back to that, and sort of wanting to be creative and being creative my whole life and not knowing how to do that and how to support myself was always like an emotional conflict for me. And when I started writing, it was kind of a relief. But the through line that you mentioned in the book is about her father, who Sam's father had a series of very successful paintings 20 years prior. He made a bunch of money, which is why they have a beach house. And he hasn't been able to create anything since. And so the family's in financial trouble. He's a bit of a one-hit wonder. And his arc is sort of reclaiming his creativity. The reason that is funny to me is I had a message a week ago from this wonderful Canadian writer named Maggie North, who said, I just finished your book, and it's so amazing how you wrote a metaphor for writing the second novel. My first reaction was, did you mean to send this to someone else? I'd really talking about it. But of course, what I was doing in my horror and terror at writing the second novel, that of course no one's going to like, was I was pouring all of my anxiety about never being able to do it again into her father.
Wow.
That's where that whole storyline came from. And I never realized it until last week.
I love that.
Oh,
Isn't it amazing?
our subconscious is so murky, and
It is.
Well,
I think that is
Sam is sort of, to me, creatively stunted too, because she's been doing something with human resources, right? What?
Human resources consultant
Yeah.
is a real job. I Googled it.
And then at the end of the book, she changes her whole life back to what, I don't know, spoilers, but I thought that was just an interesting kind of through line.
That's what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do in this book is to show, or really explore and learn a little bit about how when we're children, we are who we are. And then life happens and we get our hearts broken, and we get harder, and we learn to adjust so that we don't get our hearts broken again. And, in the end, we're just left with ourselves, and hopefully we can sort of find our way back to that person that we used to be when we were 9 years old.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Sorry, go ahead, Kristy.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, isn't it interesting too how, I don't know if this happens for you guys, but I mean, obviously, Annabelle, you just hit on this, so I think it does. But I've started to realize that I try not to write my talk about a new book until like right before it's about to come out, because I learned so many things about my book doing interviews for the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like people will say things to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I meant to do that.
Right.
I planned that the whole time, you know? And you're like,
That
Deliberate,
thread I
totally
wove
deliberate.
through with great intention.
Because I'm a huge planner. That's what I want people to think. Well, I planned this whole thing out. But I'm sure you guys feel this way. There's something so vulnerable about writing a book, because you're telling a story, but you're also sharing so much about yourself that you never intended to share.
Oh, yes.
Just sort of leads onto the page, and you can't take it back. So
That is so true.
So true.
Well, you know, we talked about your takeaway from investment banking, but I'm curious. You've written lighthearted essays for Huffington Post and a local newspaper. Plus, you've written young adult novels, and you've taught writing. Was all of this training for writing novels like the ones you write? I guess what I'm asking, in other words, is what pieces of the writing you did before brought you to where you are now, do you think?
I think for me, it's just all a confidence game.
Okay.
I started writing for young adults. And, if you want to talk about vulnerability, when I was writing for young adults, I was really just revealing a lot to readers about what I was like when I was 17. And that's fine. Who cares? That was a long time ago. And so I did that. And then I just started writing this column for adults, which for whatever reason was way more successful than my young adult novels. And I wrote another one, and then I wrote another one, and it turned into a thing. And I sort of got my grown-up voice and my confidence to talk about how things are. Not how things used to be, but like, this is what it's like to live in a house, to be married, to be raising children, to be a person in the world. And I did that. I've been writing that column for 13 years, probably. And then COVID hit, and I thought, for goodness sakes, like, let's just write this book. And it was time. I was 50 years old, and I guess I was just ready.
I love that.
Yep.
Well, your writing has a deft, light touch, which is, of course, perfect for a romantic comedy. But we all know from experience that easy reading does not translate to easy writing. Would you talk about your writing process? I think you just gave us a hint when you said you didn't plan things out too much. Or am I reading something into it that you didn't mean?
No, I'm not a planner. My process is I come up with a little thing. Like, I just, I liked, for this book, it was the Philadelphia story. I really loved her going home and running into her ex-husband. Remember, Katharine Hepburn goes home?
Yes.
But I want this young woman to go home, right before she's getting married, and run into her old boyfriend and have that and explore all that heartbreak. That's basically all I had. And I wrote this particular book 12 times.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. I feel better.
Yes, no, because it was so easy. Wrote itself, the whole thing. So it was, I wrote it in first person, third person, back and forth in time, all from her perspective, half from his perspective. Wow. And it probably was the fourth draft of writing this novel that I felt who Sam was, and I understood who she was. And that's when the writing actually becomes easy and happy. So that's my process. I just am like Mr. Magoo, typing until I feel a thing and I understand. And then I turn into a writer and I write the book.
Oh, I love that.
I do not recommend. You guys don't need my advice, but start doing it this way.
So why are you saying Wyatt is C.K. Dexter Hayes? C.K. Dexter Hayes, is that his name?
That's right. That's right.
That's the kind of crap I remember.
Yeah. No,
I was going to say, what did you pull that out of? Like, that was amazing.
I'm a huge fan of Philadelphia's story.
Me too.
And the amazing gowns Katharine Hepburn wears in that movie.
Yes.
And
do you remember the remake?
The what?
The remake of Philadelphia Story was High Society with Grace Kelly.
I think I saw it, but it felt dead inside to me.
It's different, but there's music. And so
Oh.
what's fun about that one is her ex-husband is Bing Crosby, and he's written a song for her, and the song haunts her. Anyway, that was my starting point for this novel.
Interesting.
And I
The
got
other thing, the other thing I remember from that is when they talk, she uses the sailing phrase, yar. Is that the phrase?
Yar. Yes. Yes.
They're all
Philadelphia
story of Leonardo's.
Well, I've never seen either one, so I'm just gonna.
I think we need to have a
work it
watch
out.
party. And
Yeah.
watch
Probably
it.
at Annabelle's house. We're invited.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I have-
Annabelle, when we come visit you, that'll be
I have a
great.
TV. This is so perfect.
We have a bunch of comments and questions flooding in for you on the Facebook page, but I wanted to tell you, Anissa Armstrong said that she has loved both of your books, and Ellen Benson, obviously before you answered this, wanted to know where you got your inspiration for putting the anxiety in the character of the father, which I thought was really cool.
It's my own.
Yeah, and I really like this one. Edie Cohen wants to know if summer is your favorite season for writing or reading.
I like to write all the time.
Okay.
I really like to write in the winter.
Me too.
I really do. I like to wake up in the dark and it stays dark for a long time. It sort of prolongs the morning. And I guess I like to read all the time, but I love those cozy days. You know, if there are lights on the Christmas tree, better yet. I love writing in winter.
Oh, it's great. Well, Annabelle, you have been such an incredible guest, and we are so grateful that you spent your time with us tonight. So before we tell you goodbye, can you tell everyone where they can find you online to keep up with your next book and your tour dates and all of that stuff?
So I am at annabellemonahan.com. There is a G in Monahan. And all of my tour dates are there. On social media, I'm mostly on Instagram because I forget to go to Facebook all the time, but that's Annabelle Monahan on Instagram. I know there's a button you can press, but it's just, I don't do it. And that's where you can find me. Twitter also.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming. I hope I get to see you in real life in Bedford, maybe.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm going to try to figure that out. But thank you. This has just been a total thrill to be with you guys. So thank you.
We're so happy.
Well, congratulations. What a beautiful book. Congratulations.
Yeah, we're so excited you were here. Thank you.
Thanks, Annabelle.
All right. Well, we're excited to get to Megan Miranda, but first, a few quick messages from us. And remember, we have an after show tonight, so be sure to stick around.
So as we have mentioned, you've probably heard us say this before, all four of us have new releases this year, with My The Paris Daughter and Patti's The Secret Book of Flora Lee already out, and Kristy's The Summer of Songbirds coming in just 13 days. Not that you were counting. Kristy, did you know it's out in 13 days?
You
probably didn't. You probably weren't aware.
It's just slipped my mind. I'm barely thinking about it. So
I assumed. Yeah. No, there's nothing stressful about the lead up to a publication. And of course, Mary Kay's latest, Bright Lights, Big Christmas, is coming in September. And by the way, I just read both of these books this past weekend, and they are so good. I cannot wait for everyone to get to read them. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
She forgot to say she was trapped in an airport with no escape, and that's the only reason.
Do you know that I was like, no, I was so excited because I had finished Kristy's, but I was like, I'm never going to get to Mary Kay's book because like I'm going to go back home and life's going to get in the way. And then I had a delay and I was upset for like 5 minutes. And then I was like, oh, but I think I'm going to have time to read this entire book. And I did. I read the entire book. It was so good.
Thank you.
It was the best thing about the flight delay. But anyhow, to celebrate these 4 new releases, we have some simply amazing events coming up, which means that you can catch us live as a group multiple times this year. So we have already been in Columbus, Ohio, Charleston, and Huntsville, Alabama together. And coming up, we will be in Tampa, Florida on July 20th at Oxford Exchange for Kristy's launch. Then in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina on August 1st for a breast cancer brunch fundraiser for earlier.org. And last but not least, in Darien, Connecticut on October 4th for MKA's launch. So make sure you are signed up for our Friends in Fiction newsletter and for our individual newsletters so that you are the first to know more.
And you've been listening to our Writer's Block podcast, right? It drops every Friday on all major podcasting platforms. We'll always post a link to the newest episode on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and on our Instagram feed. On our most recent episode out now, Ron and I talked to Curtis Sittenfeld about her hit novel, Romantic Comedy. Coming this Friday, Ron and Meg will be talking to Christine Pride and Joe Piazza about You Were Always Mine. So listen, review, subscribe, and share with a friend if you like what you hear.
Which you will. So
Obviously.
For sure. Guaranteed. Money back. All right. Well, now it's time for our next guest, Megan Miranda. Megan is the New York Times bestselling author of several novels, including All the Missing Girls, The Perfect Stranger, The Girl from Widow Hills, and Such a Quiet Place.
Her novel, The Last House Guest, was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. She has written several books for young adults.
She grew up in New Jersey, graduated from MIT. God, we have a lot of brainiacs here tonight. And she now lives in North Carolina with her husband and 2 children.
Her new novel, The Only Survivors, was just released in April.
Alan, can you bring Megan on, please? I didn't say Megan, can you bring Alan on?
Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is such a thrill for me. I know like we were just meeting, but I feel like I've known you all through your books and through social media for so long. So it's so exciting for me.
We're excited too.
We're so glad that you're here. And I'm so glad to know that we're like in the same state. It's great. It feels like, you know, we're pretty close, even though we're really not that close together, but we're kind of close together.
We are. Carolina,
well,
yes.
Yes. Well, Megan, this was an incredible book. The Only Survivors follows a group of 9 high school students who are the survivors of a deadly bus crash on their way home from a school service trip, who pledged to come back together each year to a house on the Outer Banks to check on each other. But by the time they meet up on the 10th anniversary of the crash, 2 of their surviving 9 have died, and something just seems off. A storm is brewing, a classmate disappears from the house, and with weather raging outside and no way to leave, the friends will make good on the promise they made all those years ago to do whatever they have to do to keep each other safe. Won't they? So there's a little bit about what this book is about. But can you tell us a little more, and then tell us what it's really about?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that summary. I feel like that was perfect and really captured the essence of what this book is about. Yeah. So it's about this group of like former classmates who, when they were seniors in high school, they were on a class service trip in the Tennessee mountains, and their vans went off the road and they ended up in a ravine with a raging river. And it took them 7 hours to escape. And at that point, there were only 9 of them left. And the book starts 10 years later, and there are 7 remaining at this point. And while it is a story about what happened then and the mystery of what's happening now, for me, it was really the story about how 9 people can have this really traumatic event happen to all of them. And yet all of them have completely different reactions to it, different responses. And it really became about who they became because of this, whether they tried to leave it behind, whether it really impacted the people they became and the choices they made from then on. So really, I was most interested in the heart of the story about like these characters and what happens to them, because they weren't friends before. They were not family. They were not friends. They were really only together because of this one traumatic event that has bonded them for so long. But one of the things I love writing about is how the past impacts the present. And I feel like all of my books can be summed up with like the phrase, the past returns. And this is very much in line with what happened in this book. So the 10-year anniversary is happening. There's whispers about like, is the truth getting out or not? You know, our numbers are down to 7. Another one of us has just gone missing. What's going on here?
Wow.
Yeah, what is going on here? So, Megan, we love talking about origin stories here on Friends in Fiction. And I understand the origin story for this book is pretty fantastic. I understand there was a innocent family vacation that somehow led to this twisty, engrossing novel.
Yes, I always feel bad because my husband always jokes like my brand is to take like beautiful, lovely places that we love and then turn them dark and creepy. And basically in this book, I did that with the beach and also took this lovely family vacation and was like, there's a dark, creepy story hidden underneath this. So we were on a family vacation visiting my in-laws in Puerto Rico. And I have 2 teenagers, and my teenage daughter and my husband were taking a walk on the beach the first morning. And a phone washed up at their feet in the surf, which is like really weird to begin with. They brought it back to our condo and they were like, wow, we found this. It was in one of those protective cases, but it was kind of cracked and coated in water and sand. And they were like, let's see if we can like turn it on and find out who the owner is. I don't know if it's because I read too many thrillers or I write them, but immediately I was like, this is a terrible idea. Like, this is obviously evidence of a crime, right? Like, we have now brought it back to our condo. This is how, and my daughter was like, why do you think that way? And I was like, doesn't everyone think this way? Like, obviously, this is what we have done. So they ignored me. They were like, why is our mother like this? She left it out in the sun, took it out of the case. We went about our day. I came back and she was the first one back to the condo and was like, I brought that phone inside and I turned it on, charged it, it works, and there's no passcode screen. Which I was like, so many red flags have happened in this. Like, now if this was evidence of a crime, we've turned it on, and now whoever was involved can track us. It kind of took over like the family vacation. It had a happy ending. They tracked down the owner who had lost it 2 weeks earlier on a jet ski in the ocean, and somehow this phone survived. And, you know, we sent it back to them happily ever after. But in the back of my mind, I was like, what if? And I couldn't let it go, to the point where I got back home and I was like, no, I'm going to have to write it, this alternate series of events. And it became a totally different story. But I started thinking about, how could a group of people who both lost and found a phone be connected? And it's a small subplot. It's like, it's in chapter 2, that scene, like it really is there. A phone washes up at the main character's feet, and it takes a totally different, dark and twisted turn from there. But it's probably the only time that'll ever happen to me where like a plot point comes to me on vacation, and then I can write about it.
Awesome.
I've had that happen. I mean, most specifically recently with working on our old house when I was writing the Homewreckers. Are there any other times in your writing career that you felt like you've been handed a sign like that?
Never. I feel like I always have to go dig for them. And it's like one idea sits in my brain for like a year, and then it merges with another idea that's been sitting there for 2 years, and suddenly it becomes a story. Yes. It's never happened to me.
Does that ever happen in the shower? That's where all the good things come in my life.
Or the middle of the night where I'm taking out my phone, like leaving myself a note that makes no sense in the morning.
Right,
when
I
go
can't
back
interpret
to
it. Exactly.
A garbled, misspelled message that was probably the best plot you've ever thought of. That one.
Ever.
Yes.
Sometimes I
You're
have
like, that's the
dreams.
genius moment.
Yeah, and in the middle of the night, I'm like, this is brilliant. I just dreamed this whole gorgeous novel. And then I'll wake up and I'm like, that is ridiculous gibberish.
Yeah.
It's only happened to me once. I dreamt a novel practically whole, and I did it. I wrote it. It was The Life Intended, my 2014
No
novel.
way.
Yes,
I didn't
yes,
know that. That's
like
amazing.
75% of that 75% of that novel I woke up with, like, it was in my head, and it's about a dream, which is super weird. But anyhow, this is not a show about me.
It's magic.
Total magic. So, Megan, like our earlier guest, Annabelle, I know you started out your career writing young adult fiction. And of course, in this book, we see this group of high schoolers and how these pivotal life moments affect them all the way into adulthood, which is something I really like writing about too, how the past impacts the present. So can you tell us how your experience writing YA affected your writing of this novel? And also, what is it about that young adult time of life that intrigues you?
Yes, definitely. So my first 6 books were young adult fiction. They were all suspense, but I was drawn to telling these stories about these big things that happen in our youth or our teen years and how that impacts the people we become. And when I started writing, my career right beforehand was I was a high school science teacher. And I was reading a lot of young adult fiction. And I think I was kind of on the other side of the desk where, you know, this expanse of time was between us, but I could kind of see like this universal experience at the heart. Like, we were in different places, we were in different moments in time, but I felt like there was something really universal about this, you know, young adult experience and that coming of age element. And I was really drawn to writing stories centered around these characters discovering who they were and figuring out their place in the world. And that's not to say that doesn't happen in adult stories at all, because I think it does. But that's kind of where I started writing. And I do think it was the experience of writing about these characters who were having these huge things happen to them because they were thrillers, who were like 17 years old. And the book finishes and I would put it aside and think, okay, they're going on with their life. Everything's fine. And then years later, I would be like, are they fine? Like, how are they doing? You know, like, did this impact who they became? Did they try to leave the past behind? Did they embrace it? And that kind of kicked off a lot of my ideas for my adult books. And my first book for adults, All the Missing Girls, was about what happened when these characters were 18. Suddenly it's 10 years later and it's all coming back. And I feel like it's something at a hallmark of a lot of the books I write. And really specifically this last one, I think I had the opportunity to kind of write those scenes when they were teens and then show them as adults as well, which is kind of fun to be able to go back and do both of those. But it's just something that is always on my mind, like these different facets of who people are and who they were. And I think, you know, when you're writing a mystery or thriller, like it's so interesting to also unwind the mysteries inside the characters and the people.
So true. You're completely
so
right.
cool.
Yeah.
Do any of your former students have ever come back to you and said, "Hey, Miss Miranda, how come you wrote my story?"
No, thankfully, no. And I only taught for about 2.5 years, and then I had kids of my own. And it's so like, I started writing when they were 1 and 3, and now they are 15 and 17. And that's what's wild to me is like, they're suddenly the age of these characters that I was writing, and they're reading about them like, Mom.
Well, it's so interesting, the blend of, and it's what's hard to write about, I think. And we were talking about it earlier. Do you go back and forth in time? Do you have flashbacks? Because anything like the plot of this novel, what they're going through now has to be affected by something that they already went through. And weaving that together, I think, is no easy feat. But I want to talk a little bit about survivor guilt. So 2 of my novels, I've addressed that, what I call surviving the surviving, right? How survivor guilt affects us, how it impacts the rest of our lives, how it affects relationships, how we shut ourselves off from things. You have a choice to become bitter or move on. And I feel like, of course, this is a huge theme in The Only Survivors. So without any spoilers, can you tell us how each of these characters are affected very differently by just the fact that they survived?
Yes, it's something I'm really fascinated about as well. And yeah, I feel like and the thing I feel is very interesting too in all different types of books and all different types of characters is every character is going to react to it differently. And so they've all had this shared experience, and yet they react to it very differently. So some of these characters, it's definitely impacted, first of all, the careers that they have gone into. One of the characters, Brody, has become an EMT. He wants to prepare himself to be able to save people. Grace is a trauma therapist. I think, she's trying to help see people through. And so you can kind of see it in some of their careers. One of the characters, Amaya, has not left the area where this accident has occurred. And she's kind of trying to bring more resources to the area so that something like this could not happen again. Yeah. And then there's other characters who act like this has never happened and have put it completely out of their mind, and maybe have seen like characters who, when you see them in the past, they didn't seem like this type of person and have become suddenly somebody who was very willing to take risks, and because the worst has already happened to them. And so it was kind of interesting to follow these different threads through each different character. And it kind of becomes a clash when they're all brought back together, because they're a reminder to each other of what happened, even if some of them are trying to move past it.
And in real life, it's true. A bunch of people go through something horrible, or even only 2 people, and the way they choose to deal with it in body, mind, and spirit are completely different. Yeah. And it makes for a fascinating novel, my friend. Way to go.
Yeah. There's like so many other things I want to ask you. So I'm like narrowing down in my head. But one of the things that I like spend a lot of time thinking about is those tiny decisions that we make that end up changing our entire life. Like the party that I almost wasn't going to go to and I met my husband, and the writing contest I wasn't going to enter. And that's how I got my first book deal. And like, it crosses my mind when I'm doing really simple things. Like I'm picking a flight time or like a GPS route, or like I'm always like writing the story of, how it's going to go. And there's so many of the decisions, like these high schoolers choosing their bus seats are seemingly, automatic and most certainly random. But The Only Survivors really shows that they can mean everything. So the survivors in this novel start to realize that something as simple as that bus seat that they chose dictated whether they lived or died. And I feel like there's a message here about either the randomness of life or the role of fate, or maybe both. So what do you want readers to think about in regard to those little choices while they're reading?
Good question.
Oh, that's such a great question. And, there are things I was thinking about a lot when I was writing. And I think there are things that Cassidy, the narrator, was thinking about a lot, because you're right, like characters change seats and suddenly their fate changed because of it. Some characters see that and some don't. Some think it was an action they took or didn't take. And I think it's only when they all come together that you're able to kind of see the collection of things. Like no one decision dictated everything. It was sort of everyone coming together. And in that same way that there's shared blame, there's also like shared responsibility and shared, like for them, it was kind of the worst day of their lives, but they also survived and were able to go to those like deep instincts in them as well. And when I'm writing a thriller and I'm thinking about place or anything, I'm always thinking like, this place could be the most beautiful place or it could be the most terrifying place. Yeah. And I think that also is the same with like how they see an event in their past. Like you can see all the horrible things about it, or you can see the good that we did in it. And I think those are the questions I was thinking about when I was writing the book. They're like, I see themes as like a question to explore, and they don't necessarily have an answer, but the characters are working their way through it. And I love that you asked that, because I feel like that's the theme and that's the question every character is working their way through in this story. And I don't necessarily have an answer, but it was definitely
that's great. I think that was the perfect answer. Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that our friend Hank Philippi Ryan is watching, and she says that she loves everyone, all of us, and we love you.
Love you too.
Love you. Yes.
Okay, and very quickly before we let you go, we have a lot of questions coming in for you, Megan. So if you have time, feel free to go answer some of them on the Facebook page. I love this one. Mary Vasquez says, does writing YA keep you young or does it make you feel old?
I love that.
That's a good question.
Both, depending on the time, I think, because like you're going back to that like time in your life. Like I could read a YA book. I read 2 pages and I'm like, I'm right back there. Like I'm transported, you know? But then I'll like read characters, I'll be writing them. And I was like, oh, I'm the parent in this book now. Like I'm removed by a generation from the characters I'm writing about. So it depends on the day, I think.
That's great.
A great answer.
Well, Megan, before we let you go, can you tell us where our viewers can find you on the road and online in the coming weeks?
Yes. So my website, meganmiranda.com, is updated usually with the events I'm doing. I have a couple later this summer and fall, which will be posted there soon. And then on social media, I'm most active on Instagram. I love Instagram. Megan L. Miranda there. And I'm author Megan Miranda on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. You have been such a great guest. I feel like we could have talked to you and Annabelle all night, but we have to let you go. So thank you so much.
This was so fun. I love chatting with you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Miranda.
Thank you.
Well, what an evening, but it is not over yet. We will be back in just a minute welcoming Mary Huddleston and Asher Paul on the after show in just a moment. You're not going to want to miss them, so do not move from your seat. And don't forget that you can find all of our back episodes on YouTube, and we'll be back next week to welcome Marie Bostwick and Tara Shelton Harris. And we'll have such a fun episode in store for you then, and we can't wait. So we'll see you next week, but first, we'll see you in about 30 seconds in the after show.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.
How fun was that?
That
Golly.
was, they were great.
I mean, talk about two great guests, right?
I
Yeah.
love hearing where these things come from for them.
Yeah,
Like
when I was,
something none of us would make into a story. I love it.
Yeah.
when she was talking about, and Patty, you were talking about it too, survivor's guilt, and they're all on this van, and I thought, this how many submersible submarine stories
I was thinking
we
about the same
are we
thing.
going to have coming out in the next couple of years?
Yeah.
Mary Kay, there was an article about a father and son who were supposed to be on it
Yeah.
and decided it didn't sound safe enough. And the other
Wow.
father and son got their spot.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
that same, yes.
Yes, that there's like twists of fate. Well, it's like George, Edith, and Cornelia Vanderbilt were supposed to be on the Titanic, and Edith got this like weird
Wow.
feeling, that she just didn't want to be on that boat, and they switched and George was mad because it was like the thing, right? Like everyone was going to be on that boat and save their life.
Two of the Telfair sisters were supposed to be on the Pulaski
Oh yeah. Wow.
steamship. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Like
one
surviving
Telfair
Savannah.
sister said, I just have a terrible feeling about it. We're not
Ah.
going. I mean, would we have the Telfair Museum? Would we have half of what we have?
In
I mean,
Savannah.
that's why I love that question, Kristy, just that. That's
Well,
what
I
makes
have a
it
bad
very
feeling
humbling.
about most things, so it's hard.
I know,
I
me
was gonna
too.
say, I never know
I
when
would
to
just
be
say
like-
everything.
I have a bad feeling about going to Publix, so then I just don't.
That's how I feel about cleaning my house. That's really why I don't do it. Yeah.
The
I have a really
laundry-
bad feeling about this.
That's how I
The
feel
one-
about working out. Like,
Yeah.
I have a bad feeling about this. I could
know.
get really
I could
hurt
get injured.
today.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have more in store and we are so excited to get started. So let's introduce Mary and Asher. MKA, that's you, girl.
I'm waiting for Alan to bring them on. I'm like, what's going on? Why doesn't Alan bring them on? Mary Huddleston is the co-founder and creative director of Please Be Seated, the premier event rental company in Nashville, Tennessee. Mary and her husband started the business in 2014 and now have more than 30 employees servicing events nationwide.
In 2018, Mary established Mrs. Southern Social, a lifestyle platform focused on modern entertaining at home, and she has been featured in Southern Living, Southern Lady, Style Blueprint, and N Focus magazine.
Asher Fogel-Paul is a human interest and entertainment journalist. Her work has been published in Marie Claire, Cosmo, Esquire, and many other places. She has an MS in magazine journalism from Columbia University and a BA in English from Texas Christian University. She lives in New York City with her husband and four kids. Mary and Asher's new novel, Piece of Cake, was just released on June 20th.
All right, Alan, can you bring Mary and Asher on, please?
Hi, ladies.
Hello, ladies. Thank you
Praise
so much for coming on with us tonight. We're so excited to talk to you about this fabulous, fun, charming, wonderful novel. So thanks for being here.
Gosh,
Thank you for having us.
Well, so to kick us off, ladies, like I said, Piece of Cake is it's the perfect summery novel that we hope everyone's reading right now. So Mary, can you tell us what it's about? And then Asher, can you tell us what it's really about?
I feel like we should flip that if that's okay with y'all.
Flip it. So that's what I meant to say. Asher, can you tell us what it's about? And then Mary, can you tell us what it's really about?
I mean, Piece of Cake is about the villain from our first book, Claire, who you find out really made some bad choices and is in Nashville rebuilding her life and going to save the magazine that she works for, which is a beloved Southern weddings magazine. And she comes with an idea to do a documentary series. And of course, her boss brings in an influencer who immediately ticks her off. And so it's kind of just about their journey and the crazy weddings that they go to, and ultimately really her kind of having to reckon with who she is and who she wants to be. So anyway, Mary can give you the fun version of that.
Well, I joke. The reason I switched that question is because I joke that when I describe Asher and I's relationship, that we're a bit of a mullet, business in the front, party in the back. And Asher is just as much fun, but she certainly is the more gifted writer. No, so this book is a lot of fun. Just like the first novel, really the inspiration comes from all of the crazy weddings that I experienced, and then some of the crazy antics that Asher covered in her days as a celebrity journalist. And so, but what it boils down to really is the art of not being canceled. I think right now, and especially when we wrote this book, everyone was getting canceled for anything that you did. And obviously there are some things that are worth being canceled about. But others, we both have young children. And so our main character makes a big mistake, not only a mistake, she makes a horrible choice. And this book is about how she doesn't let that define the rest of her life. And she really has to come back through a lot, but it's obviously a comedy on top of that. So that's the underlying message, but it's a lot of fun. And I joke that Nashville is the gift that keeps on giving. Our bachelorette scene is insane. We're a bit like Bourbon Street at the moment. We're trying to figure that out. So a lot of the antics in the book are true to life, unfortunately.
I love that. Yeah, there's a lot of that in Savannah too. Well, Asher, I, like you, began my career in the journalism world. What made you decide to take the leap into novel writing?
Honestly, it was kind of always something I wanted to do. I majored in English, like many of y'all probably, and sculpture. And my parents were like, so how are you going to make money? Yep. Sculpture and books. And so then I went into journalism because honestly, Mary was a broadcast major and I was like, that seems interesting. And so I started working for the campus newspaper and got a little hooked at, like, honestly, the immediate gratification, and getting to tell real people's stories. So it was like, I feel like books were always there and kind of always a dream, but then it was a bit of a roundabout way of getting there. So
you all knew each other in school?
Oh, we lived together.
The first book actually starts based on some fact. I mean, I'll just say this. Our books are inspired by our lives. I can't give away any secrets. They're inspired, but we share a lot of the similar stories and we were there together. And so it's been really neat that as we've gone separate ways, but this has brought us back together and it's been so fun.
Love that.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, you mentioned that your experiences as a wedding planner and just living in Nashville in general influenced the writing of the novel. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I'm just kind of curious about where the genesis of the ideas came from. I think this is really cool.
Absolutely. Well, I was a wedding planner, so many years. I'm not going to tell you how many years I'd been doing it. That'll give away my age. But forever, back before before wedding planning really was a thing. And I was working in Dallas at the time. I started in Dallas, ended up in Nashville, and we did multi-million-dollar weddings, over the top, like where Earth, Wind, and Fire would perform, and Earth and Wind don't get along and have to have separate dressing rooms. And
Earth and Wind don't.
It's a real thing. I still think to this day they don't get along. But anyways, I had all these crazy stories and I would tell them to my friends and they were like, there is no way that happened. There is no way that the bubble dancer that even existed was dancing in a bubble on a lake at a client's $1 million wedding and the wind blew her into the shrubbery and we had to beat her out with sticks. Like, you're like, that doesn't happen. And you're like, but it does. And so I was telling Asher these stories and she was like, we have to make this a book. But we decided with book 1 and book 2, it didn't need to be a tell-all. It needed to be a bit like The Devil Wears Prada, Crazy Rich Asians. And so that is the genesis of the book. She took my crazy stories and turned it into a novel. And then Nashville was then it made sense. It was another city I knew well, and it's booming, and the wedding scene is huge. Content is there, all the things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So before I ask this question, Asher, I just have been having these flashes of writing a novel with my college roommate and thinking, like, what would that even, we're still best of friends and I love her. Mary Kay met her the other night. Her name is Beth, but oh my gosh, like it would be the content. You have me on a whole tangent with the college roommates writing. But Asher, your protagonist, Claire, is a magazine journalist, and the magazine is one issue away from folding. Tell me how you used your past experience in that. Was there ever a moment you were terrified that was going to happen? Was it always on the table? Like, talk to us about that.
I mean, I feel like journalism is, I feel like magazines are never going to go away. People love them. It's like people saying books are dead and now we have today. But I feel like I've worked at so many magazines that either folded or did layoffs, or it was around layoffs, or it was like, I went to grad school and I feel like my magazine heroes were all like, well, the internet's going to really mess things up for us. And I'm like, I should probably figure that out. So it was always kind of there, but honestly, most of the stories in the book were there. I felt like I love magazines, and there's a bit of just like the desire to save them and support them, and the people who work in them and tell stories in them. And it's just a beautiful way of telling stories to me. And so I wanted to kind of like incorporate that in the book, but also ultimately, like, you get to just, in the same way a wedding planner does as a journalist, like, you just get to sit there and be like, so what's happening? Like, everybody just tells you things, and they tell you the craziest things, and they tell you the deepest things and the wildest things, and you just get to observe it all with a tape recorder. And so I kind of loved having that lens on this world, because you get to be a little bit more of an impartial observer. Like in our first book, she was the hero and she had to kind of constantly be getting engaged. And in this book, she's having to kind of like constantly fight that of like, I could intervene, or I could just watch this train wreck happen. And it was also just kind of a fun little way of doing it.
But I love that you can take that experience and weave it and for us to enjoy, not just for you to enjoy.
Good. I'm glad.
That's so true, though. I remember I went to journalism school, and I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be really scary and nerve-wracking, and then learning, like, people really like to talk about themselves. And if you will just be, like, a little quiet, they will tell you things that you're like, you shouldn't be saying that to me.
That's so true. No. So true.
Like
we're on the record. Should I tell you?
I'm writing this. Like, are you sure you want to say this?
There's a recorder.
Yeah.
Y'all,
Ladies,
the things you see as a wedding planner and that you hear and that your clients think that they can tell you, it's astonishing. The things that I have done for brides, I can't, this is like a G-rated program. I can't tell you. And so, but it is, it's like whether through, you're writing it for a magazine story or they're living it, like these intimate moments of their lives, people just forget, like, we have ears and we have memories and we can remember what you're telling us. And we might turn it into a book one day.
There you go.
Little do you know.
Slightly veiled, but not enough.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, ladies, I think I will speak for all of us when I say that we're just really fascinated by co-authors. It's such an interesting concept. 3 of us are interested in it. 1 of us is not interested in it. We won't mention any names on this show, but some people have probably heard us discuss this before. But so I'm not going to assign these questions to either of you. I'm going to let you pick, since I picked wrong last time. So one of you, I'm just kidding. Will you guys tell us how you decided to write together? And then can you just give us what's the day to day? Like what does it look like when you are actually sitting down to write a book together? Like, how does that go?
I'll give the quick answer and then Asher can elaborate. I was a broadcast journalism major, so I do think there's a very big difference between broadcast news and print news. And I will get to a point here. And I think that our writing style kind of works that way. I am very animated. I will give you the very, just kind of like the 30-second pitch. And then Asher will take that and give you the full article. And so we worked well together. And we get this question a lot because I guess it's really hard for some people. I think we've been very fortunate because we're so different. Yeah. It's worked. So.
Yeah. Interesting. I think it's very much, also we wrote both books. We sold the books in summer 2020. So the entire process was pretty much all remote. Which was not, I think, other than the very beginning ideas, we never got to write in the same place really. And so I think it's been helpful that we have a bit of a ping pong instead of sitting down and being like, let's just type this out together, which I think there are some collaborators who do that. We'll sit in a room and just kind of kick it around. We, I think, have been able to kind of play off our strengths and be like, okay, Mary will give me a crazy story and I'll come up with some structure, or I'll be like, the character has to do this and we need to get here. I need you to give me a gorgeous wedding detail, or we need a terrible, terrible date. And I know you can make a really funny one and we need to end up at this point. And so I think it's a bit of a back and forth, and Mary will read it and be like, this is not funny. But so I think,
or Asher will be like, we need to like have some more meat to this. So it's been a good pairing in that way.
Well, it turns out a beautiful finished product. So whatever y'all are doing works, and I hope that you keep doing it. So well, we want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I know it's a really busy time of year and you have a lot going on with your family. So thank you for being here. It was so great to see you. And to all of you out there, please do not forget to pick up your copy of Piece of Cake. It is a charming and so fun story, and you're really, really going to love it. As always, we are deeply grateful for your support of the show, of our books, of our guests and their books, and most of all, of us. So thank you for being with us, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
ladies.
Do we leave?